This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance. Here with Tony Palo today. Tony, how's it going?
Going good.
Tony Palo is a performance industry legend at this point. He first made waves in the Honda community, at least on my radar, being the first in the 8s back in 2008, and now in the GTR community. His shop, T1 Race Development, is full of 1,500 horsepower plus GTRs from all over the world, and he's the co-owner of Injector Dynamics, an industry leader in performance fuel injectors and fuel system hardware. So, Tony, I've always been impressed with your ability to be cool under pressure, especially when dealing with people in an industry full of egos. So, tell us, how do you do it?
I guess the world full of egos almost seems normal to be by now. I've been doing this almost 20 years, and in this type of industry, I think you're always going to have that person. I think over time, I've gotten really good at sniffing out bullshit and finding out who's the real deal and who's not. And I'm sure you can pick that out about people pretty easy now too. When somebody's trying to sell you something, they're always going to make themselves and their product sound good. But I think you really got to do your research and find out what's real and what's not, and take everything with a grain of salt.
Right. So when you get an email that clearly doesn't make sense, whether it's a request or a sales pitch, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you sniff out the bullshit?
Well, let's look at scams and frauds and fraudulent orders, and most of them are really easy to pick out. It's something along the lines of, I'm interested in your product, and I'm in Singapore, and I want to pay with a credit card, and I want you to ship UPS. You've gotten that one once or twice. Yep. But, man, I've online orders. I get so much fraud stuff online, like almost to the point where I just want to stop accepting online orders. And they're so easy to pick out now. And all my guys know what to look for. Billing and address don't match, and they're ordering it on a Monday, and they pay next day air for it, and just there's a lot of little red flags. And so we'll follow up with requesting a picture of the front and back of the credit card, driver's license, and send them a credit card authorization form to fill out. And if you catch it and you're right, then you never hear back from them after that.
Right. So have you ever been burned in that situation?
Yep.
Plenty of time.
Not plenty, but probably 4 or 5 times over the years. And one of them was fairly recent for about $1,500, and one of my sales guys just didn't catch it. But it was 2 sets of fuel injectors for the same car, next day air. And it came back, and I look at the order, and I'm like, did you not think about that? And he was like, man, I didn't catch it. But looking back, he's like, yeah, it was obvious.
So was that an international order or a domestic order?
No, I won't even accept international orders online. So
really?
If somebody wants something, I mean, we ship international almost daily, but if you want it international, we'll process the order through email or whatnot, and you can pay by bank transfer. And then once payment's done, we ship, no problems there.
What are the only ways that you accept payment then internationally? Is wire transfer it? That's the only way that you're going to buy something from ID or T1? For
a new customer, more or less, yes. If it's a small order, I'll accept PayPal if we're shipping to the address on the PayPal account. Anything over $1,000, especially for a new customer, only by wire transfer. I've got a lot of international dealers, and once we have a business relationship established, then, we'll take credit, we'll take whatever. But it's the new customer, and I don't know, you can tell when somebody's full of shit, and you just know, especially if they want to give you problems, say, I need payment by wire transfer, and they go, well, how come? I always pay by credit card with so-and-so, and it's like the more they fight it, the more likely they are to be fraud.
That's awesome. So we really got down the rabbit's hole quickly and kind of got off track a little bit, but I'm really glad that we did because I've been dealing with international orders and problems with that pretty recently, and it's hard to hold your ground when people are really barking at you, and especially when it feels like a sale.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's not real sale anyways. You're gonna lose it to a chargeback.
Yep.
So stepping back a little bit and going back to kind of your start. So have you always been a car guy? Do you come from a car family? Tell us about that situation.
Surprisingly, not so much. My dad painted cars, so I was around cars here and there, but I really didn't have any interest in cars. BMX bikes were my thing. Rode BMX bikes all the time. When I turned 16, I bought a car, and that was a way to take my bike to cooler places to ride. And so
right.
It was transportation at that point. And I guess junior year in high school, I started having a little bit of interest. I remember a guy at my school had a red Civic Coupe with what I thought was a thrust exhaust because it had a Gretty Trust sticker on the bumper. And I had no idea that a Honda could be fast. And I ended up buying a Civic. I didn't even know how to drive a manual transmission, so I bought an automatic Civic DX. And was somewhat surprised how slow it was. Because when I did the math, it had 105 horsepower or whatever, and my buddy had a Civic Si with 125. But, I had headers, I had Flowmaster muffler, I had an intake. So I should have had more horsepower than him, yet his car would walk away from mine. And after getting beat too many times, I bought a 92 Integra and started doing some mods on that and took off from there.
So when you do the math and you add 15 horsepower with an intake and 15 horsepower with an exhaust and 15 horsepower with a header, then obviously you're up, well beyond his 125. So yeah, right. The math just doesn't work.
So damn those magazines.
So, okay, you did that. You started to modify that. You get into the Honda world. What's your first job?
My first job in the automotive industry was Jotech Motorsports. So when I bought my Integra...
And how old were you then?
I was 17.
Okay.
So I bought my Integra. I went up there, and I had a little bit of cash left over from selling the Civic. And I ordered intake, header, exhaust, springs, and FUBA antenna, the antenna that goes on the roof.
Fancy.
So I was going to install the springs myself, but I didn't have anything to cut the springs, and I knew I wanted the car really low. So I asked Kenny if he would cut the springs for me, and he said, yeah. And I said, I want 3 coils cut. And he's like, man, it's going to be too low. And I was like, no, that's what I want. He goes, I'll tell you what, how about we cut 1.5? And if you want to cut more, you bring them back up here, and I'll cut them for free. I was like, all right, cool. So he cuts 1.5. I go home. I install the springs in my driveway by myself. I go back up there a few hours later. I'm like, it's not low enough. He was like, you put those on? I said, yeah. He goes, by yourself? I said, yeah. He goes, you want a job? I said, yeah. So that was it. I didn't know anything about cars. I didn't know how a turbo worked. I didn't know anything when I started doing this. I just had a little bit of mechanical ability and sense. And the first job I did there was putting springs on a Lexus SC300, which is kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah. So you're working at Jotech, and you were there for how many years?
I was there for about 7 years.
And did you go straight from there to T1?
No. So I worked there for about 7 years, learned a lot. By the end of my time there, I was doing all the tuning, engine building, chassis work, welding. This was just stuff that I picked up on my own because I wanted to learn it. And then Bob Norwood started working with us when we went to methanol on the race car, and we put a Mototech on the car, and I started learning that stuff. And then Bob got a deal to build a couple pro front-wheel drive drag cars, and he offered me a position as a fabricator working for him. And it was a good opportunity to make a lot more money and do something different. So left. I did that, worked there for a couple years, learned a lot, good and bad. And then after that, decided it was time and started T1.
And how old were you when you did that?
I guess I was 26 or so.
Okay. So when you were transitioning from Norwoods and starting your own shop, did you know it was going to work out no problem? Like, was it easy or was there hurdles along the way? Did you have any self-doubt?
I didn't have any self-doubt. I knew it was going to work because there was no other option. Whatever it took, it was going to work. I went in both feet first. I left Norwoods. I started this full-time, real full-time, 12, 16-hour days. And I think that's the only way it would have worked. If I was trying to do both, you can't devote enough time to make a business successful that way. Not in this industry.
So what's it take? How many hours a day? How many days a week? For how many years?
Oh, man. So when I started, I was single and I didn't have any kids. So that helped a ton. And it didn't even seem like a lot of time because you love what you're doing and you're building this thing for yourself and you just go in and do it. But, I mean, it was at least 6 days a week, 8 to 12, 14-hour days sometimes. I did everything. It was just me for about 8 months. And after that, I couldn't keep up. There wasn't enough hours in the day. So that's when I hired Mike. And, he kind of started out for me the same way I started out at Jotech, in that he had some good mechanical sense, didn't know that much about cars, didn't know how to TIG weld, and learned it all along the way.
Okay, so something I want to take away from that. So you're out there, you're doing your own thing, and you're saying that it doesn't feel like you're at work because it's for you, it's yours. So, I mean, I feel the same way. People ask, why do you work so much? How do you work so much? And if I go home, I'd be doing the same thing where I'd be involved in this industry, whether I'm at home or here at the shop.
Yeah, we never actually leave work.
It's never gone,
yep.
But it doesn't feel, I mean, at least most of the time, it doesn't feel like work.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that's because it's for you, it's yours, it's your baby.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part. And, even outside of that, I mean, I've never had what most people would consider a normal job. I worked at a bike shop when I was 15 years old, and I was opening and closing the place on Sundays, being the only guy there. I mean, I was running that place at 15, and then I went from there to another bike shop, then I went to Jotech, then I went to Norwoods, then I had this. So those are the only jobs I've had my whole life, and it's always been something that I really enjoyed doing. So I've never had a time in my life where I didn't enjoy going to work.
I'm envious. That's good stuff. So when you're starting, go ahead.
Doing something that you love to do, it's hard to put a value on that.
Right. So how do you actively seek making money at your job, or does it just come naturally?
No, I think you have to actively seek it, because while there's a lot of fun stuff to do here and a lot of stuff that would be really cool to do, you gotta have the business sense to go, well, that would be great. I would love to spend 3 weeks building this crazy billet oil pan or something, but right. I have to understand that I also have bills to pay and payroll and everything else that goes along with it. So you always have to keep in mind making money. I've worked with people who, they didn't own the place and they didn't have that concept and would spend a week doing something that should have taken a day. And, I have to have a talk with my guys every once in a while and go, listen, this might not seem like you spent an excessive amount of time on this, but take a step back now and look at our labor rate's $120 an hour, and you just spent 6 hours mounting and plumbing this boost control solenoid, and it looks kick-ass. But yeah, can I hand the customer a bill for $800 for installing this boost control solenoid? And I have to keep that in everybody's head, because we have to do good work, but you got to draw the line somewhere.
Right, and where do you draw the line?
Yep, it's got to be something that is done correctly, I mean, you don't cut the corners and you don't, go, well, I didn't think you would want to spend a lot of money, so I just zip tied the boost control solenoid on there. So you still have to do it right, but we don't need to go CNC machine a bracket to hold the boost control solenoid for a one-off application.
For one piece.
Yeah.
Right. So, really good advice. Makes a lot of sense. Practical application that you can start using in your business today. It obviously makes sense, but it's hard to put that into practice when, you're, treading water just to survive. It's hard to keep, it's hard to draw that line. Do we make this really, really nice, or do we, do we just hurry up and get to the next thing? Especially
early on when you're trying to make a name for yourself. I mean, that's kind of where the race car stuff comes in. That's basically how we went about showing people what we've got and really making a name for yourself and ignoring the fact that you're throwing money away, because
you're throwing lots, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and hours. I mean, it's insane to campaign a car.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you can't quantify it. You can't turn it into a direct return.
And you surely don't want to try.
Yep. So what do you do in that situation? You've got a race car that's costing you, I don't know, what, $30,000, $50,000 a year? What do you do as far as, do you just chalk it up to, okay, I'm learning. This is experience here. I'm gonna go make a name for myself. I call it advertising.
Yeah. So it's got that, and the fact that we love to do it. So that's what keeps you going, and that's what makes you willing to put in that kind of money and time. If it was okay, so take that dollar amount and just say, I'm just gonna build everybody's engine for free. I mean, I would have spent it racing anyway, but you don't get anything good out of that.
Right.
So the ends justify the means, I guess, and we still do it.
So we talked about some successes. We talked about business. We're going to switch gears a little bit here, and I want you to tell us the story of the worst experience that you've had in business. Now, this should be a situation that it's had you flat on the floor, ready to quit. Maybe you messed up on something or missed something. How do you recover from that and overcome? What's your mindset?
So really early on when I got this going, I had saved up a fair amount of money from working in Norwoods. I was doing some tuning on the side, and I had about $25,000 in cash coming into starting T1. And you can't be 26 years old and go to a bank with $25,000 and say, hey, I need to get a loan to start this business building race cars. It's not going to happen. So I went into it knowing that. I went in small. I bought what I needed, and I had a lot of credit card credit available, knowing it's not ideal, but that was what I had. And so for the first year or two, that was my cash flow. And, I didn't need a lot of money myself, so it's not like I was paying myself a lot. I was covering my bills and then trying to keep the ball rolling. So I racked up a lot of credit card debt. And again, I went in both feet first, knowing, I've just got to give this my all or there's no chance at it working. And so I have to believe in myself enough to do what I have to do, put on credit cards. I'll make it work in the end. And I was okay with that until, if it's still like this or not, but at this time, if you missed one payment on a credit card, they bumped you up to the max interest rate, which was 33% or something. And I missed a payment on each one of the credit cards, not because I didn't have the money, just because I was so overwhelmed with everything, and I just forgot about it.
Right. And
everything went up to the max interest, and I was paying as much money a month as I could on those and barely covering the interest. And, I was looking at it like, I don't know how anything's going to change. I mean, I can keep doing this, but it's not going to change until I can pay a lot more to these credit cards. So it was along the lines of $50,000 on credit cards at that point that had bumped up to 33, 34% interest or something. It was ridiculous. And I didn't come from a lot of money. My parents didn't have a lot of money. This was all on me, and I've never been one to really ask for help. I had it. I was I hadn't given up. And at one point, my girlfriend mentioned something to my mom about it, and my mom asked me, and I was like, yeah, I'm okay, I got it. She's like, that's silly. So she ended up taking out a loan against her house to pay off the cards, and then I paid off that loan, which was at a reasonable interest rate again. And that was an unbelievably huge help. And I ended up, within 2 years had that paid off and haven't owed any money related to the business since then.
That's crazy. So 33% interest on $50,000.
Yeah. I don't have any credit cards anymore.
That's $15,000 in interest in a year.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you overcame that situation, but what was your mindset at that point? Were you worried?
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, everything, anything that happens with the business, it's like, okay, I can do this. And with that, I was like, man, I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm not going to stop paying on them, but I don't know how I'm going to get ahead.
So you got to look at business. Every decision is either like cash in the short term, or I'm going to spend some cash and I'm going to get this return over time. Building a race car is one of those things. Obviously, you love it. You do it for that reason. But it also is something that's going to return as you build a reputation. So in that situation, you're in debt, $50,000 at an exorbitant interest rate. Do you look to change what you do on a day-to-day basis to bring in quick cash? Like how do you do that, pay that off, but still build a business that adds value and isn't just a sellout, pushing every piece of crap product that you can find? How do you keep the mindset of quality when you're in debt up to your eyeballs?
This was so early on that it wasn't, I wasn't manufacturing anything. I was basically just building cars that came in. And so it wasn't, let's invest this in R&D to develop this product and whatnot. It was, I got this CRX I need a turbo kit built for, and just taking what came in and trying to knock it out and bring in the next one. But when you're doing that type of work, there's literally a cap on how much money you can make, because you can only do so much work.
Right. So you can only scale to as many hours as you can work in a day.
Yep.
And that's the limit of the business.
And that's it. So, now things are a lot different. We invest in equipment and whatnot. It's a lot long term than it ever was before. So
that's really good stuff. My biggest thing is, how do you stay positive in those situations when things are looking really bad and you just keep plugging away? You just keep showing up. That's just one of those things.
I feel like
got to keep going.
Yeah, I'm a pretty positive person, and
So we're back. Tony Palo here. Tony, tell us a story about a project that you're most proud of and why.
I would say without a doubt it was the Integra. That was what really helped cement the T1 name. Learned a ton about it. Made waves. It was a good thing. I talked about wanting to break into the 8s with that car. I think quite a ways before people were even considering it was possible. We did a whole new build. To interject, that's how all of my race car stuff always ends up. We come back from a race, tear it all apart, start over again, go to an event with everything brand new, and cross our fingers and hope it works. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But we went out to the first ever Outlaw Shootout in Englishtown, New Jersey in 2008. Drove from Texas to New Jersey, all this new stuff. Went out there and first qualifier broke these brand new axles that we had. And so scrambled around in the pits trying to find a solution. Oh, second round we put our backups in, broke those too. So
you haven't made a pass yet. You've lined up twice, haven't made a pass.
Not even qualified yet. So I finally beg and borrow enough parts to get it back together. I had to change the differential. So transmission's out, a part in the pits, borrow a differential from somebody, borrow some axles, get it in there. Third round of qualifying, go up, and this is the last shot. And the car goes a 9-1 for number one qualifier. So I come back and I'm looking at the data, and it was soft in a lot of different places. I wasn't full throttle shifting it. It was, this thing needs to go in gear. It needs to not brake. And it did that. And so that night, going over the data, the next day, I'm like, man, it's going to go fast. I know it's got more in it. So I went out and I think it was first round of eliminations, went a 9-1 again. And then the second round went 8-9. And I remember Roger was at the scales, and I get to the scales at the end, and he's like, congrats, man. I was like, what? He's like, you ran an 8. I'm like, no fucking way. He goes, yeah. I was like, are you serious? Are you fucking with me? And he's like, no, seriously. And then I look up, and all the guys are coming down on a four-wheeler, hands in the air.
Freaking out.
Yeah. So, I mean,
dude, I got goosebumps right now, man, legitimately.
I've never been that high. So we come back to the pits. Obviously, everybody swarms in the pits.
Yeah.
So we're going over everything, and Steve De La Cruz, my sticker guy, had made a decal that said T1 first in the 8s, and he sent it to me before the race, and he said, I'm just sending this to you now so you got it when you need it. I said, all right. So I had it in the door pocket of the Integra. So we came down there at the scales. I get out, put the sticker on the fender, came back. So that race was there were a lot of bounties involved in that race, quickest 60-foot, 8th, quickest ET, highest mile, and all this stuff. And pretty much knocked out almost all those with one pass. And then went to the finals, ran another 8 in the finals to win the event. I could have on a better weekend for a race team. So
yeah,
that was pretty awesome.
That's like the dream. I think that's what everybody, when they're building a car, when they're in the garage, that's what they're thinking about. They're like envisioning that scenario happening to them.
Yeah, it was pretty special.
Good shit. So in one sentence, Tony, how have you succeeded when other people have failed?
Never quit, and you have to do what you say you're going to do. Because
one more time with that last one, because that's so important. One more time.
You have to do what you say you're going to do. Been so many people that come out, whether it's a new product or a new company or a new car or whatever. Oh, we're going to do this and this and this, and then disappear. And, you can't come back from that. You can't come back with another product and say something, because people have lost all faith in you. And if with anything in this world, if you can't trust somebody, what do you have?
Especially this day and age, especially these days, when everybody's claiming that they have the best, the fastest, the cheapest, everybody's constantly jumping all over the place saying, I have what you need.
Yep. I don't know if you remember, back in the Honda Tech days, I got termed the bullshit police. And we're like, who are you to get to say what's bullshit and what's not? I'm like, I'm calling what I see. And I can pretty confidently say I don't think I called bullshit on anything that didn't end up to be bullshit.
And now you're partners with the other bullshit police, and you guys are the dynamic duo.
Somebody's got to do it, man.
So if you could get one do-over, you can go back in time and get a do-over for just one situation in your business, what would it be? You get to reset the clock on one thing.
Probably the ID 1600, which hopefully nobody remembers. We found a new injector that turned out to be absolutely amazing on the flow bench. And these things, 1600cc injector, high impedance, would idle at stoic on pretty much anything. I mean, it was just amazing what they would do. Our test bench runs C16 fuel at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, very tightly regulated on temperature. Everything's great. We release it. We start putting them in cars. I get the random email, hey, my car's, I drive it for an hour and it starts getting really lean, and everybody's got a fuel system problem. They just don't know it. Once you start logging fuel pressure and really paying attention to stuff, almost every car has at least some kind of a problem, especially street cars that don't have any instrumentation. So,
right.
Naturally we go, okay, well, let's figure out what's wrong with your car and look into, fuel boiling and pump cavitation and everything. And then we start getting some people that actually had fuel pressure logged, and so we're going back through the data and trying to make sense of it. turns out the injector had an extreme fuel temperature sensitivity problem to along the lines of when Paul put him in his test vehicle there in Arizona in the middle of the summer, over a 45-minute drive home, flow was reduced by about 50%.
Wow. And what kind of temperature change are we talking about? From 125 to what? What was
about
Paul saying?
155.
So only 30 degrees?
Yep.
Or only 30 degrees would reduce flow by that amount?
Yep.
Wow.
And so, this wasn't, it gets hot and it richens up a little bit. It's okay. It was the complete wrong way. So now everything's nice and heat soaked, and we're going to let it get, a point and a half leaner. So that was bad. So we immediately stopped on them, exchanged anybody that had them for a set of ID2000s for no charge. And that was the easy part. The hard part of that deal was we had a year-long commitment to Bosch for that part number, and that's the only way we can maintain stock on this stuff. Bosch is a really big company. You can't just call and order 1,000 injectors. Like, if you call and order 1,000 injectors, you might have them in 2 or 3 months. So you have to get blanket orders going for a full year, and this was still fairly early on with our relationship with Bosch, and it was over $100,000 commitment with Bosch that it wasn't their fault. This injector wasn't intended to be used with gasoline, and we couldn't say, there's a problem with your injector, we need our money back, because we were the ones in the wrong. So there was, the discussion of, we just have to take the rest of these and then, do what we can with it, whatever, because we don't want to ruin this relationship that we're trying to build. So we did, and I guess the good news for us is that a ton of other people continued to sell and still sell this injector, just ignoring this huge problem. So ended up that one of the guys that we used to get injectors from, before we were getting them direct from Bosch, said, hey, I'll buy all those 1600s from you, because people are still buying them from me. So they just kept coming in from Bosch, we kept paying for them, and Paul ended up selling them to that guy, and they ended up out there because other people still sell them.
Okay.
So
in that situation, are they out there in a situation, in an environment where they could be a problem, or Absolutely. Is it like a marine application where they're not having the heat issue?
Nope. They're in cars on the road.
Through different brands?
Yep.
Wow. So how do you avoid that situation moving forward? So you guys learned a valuable lesson there where you had a test procedure. You thought that it was, pretty reasonable. So you said, okay, cool, we're good to go. Obviously, you learned something there, and I'm sure the test procedures have changed since then. The test procedures on the test bench are the same. We know why that one had the problem, and we know that other ones won't have that problem. But there are multiple vehicles now as part of the company that get used for testing. Ford, GM, Nissan, Honda, Chrysler. So everything is validated in the different injector models for the OE stuff. All that stuff is validated and tested on instrumented vehicles before anything gets out. We can test the stuff on the bench and know, okay, this injector's linear down to this fuel mass. We know that it'll run a 1.6 liter engine at Stoic with no problem, but everything still gets put in a real vehicle to validate everything now. GTR runs in closed loop all the time, and they would go out there and get 10 or 15% lean, and nobody would ever notice that it was a problem. So unless you were monitoring closed loop trims over a reasonable drive, you wouldn't even see that there was a problem until the 20% trim's maxed out and it's lean enough for you to notice. So it was a matter of putting them in a car, and on the dyno it was great, and go drive it, and everything seems fine. But nobody ever even thought to look at injector flow rate versus time or versus fuel temp, because it's just not something you normally think about. Right. So many takeaways from that situation. Obviously, your guys' quality control is huge. Making a reliable quality product is really what you're all about. It's not just about making a product that you can turn a dollar on. And that's something that I think you're known for, and I think everybody has a lot of respect for you and your company because of those, that that philosophy. I want to switch gears here. We're a little bit over on time, but there's just so many good things that you're dropping that we're just going to keep this going. I got a fan question that says, how many people walk away from a performance build if they have to give up creature comforts? Now, this goes into like the new Motec M1 stuff where we have communication and with the factory gauge cluster, and all the new cars are that way. So if you had a new vehicle come in, how many people would walk away from a performance build if they have to give up, for example, gauge cluster functionality? Is that a deal breaker for people?
It would be for me.
Yeah.
I mean, in a race car, it's one thing, but I don't think that's acceptable with the technology that's available now. So
what's the option? It's just Motec M1, right?
Well, here's the issue with any new car. You got to look at what management systems are available, and ultimately that's usually the deciding factor of how far you can go with that application without turning it into a race car. So luckily, even before the M1, Cobb's got the ECU sorted really well in the GTR. So you can make a ton of power on a stock ECU. There's a lot of things Motec does better, but I wouldn't say you need a Motec on a GTR until, by 1500, if you haven't done one, I think you're doing it wrong. But if let's say the M1 didn't exist and we were having to retrofit an M800 onto a GTR, one, I can't do it. But even if we were able to make the engine run and lose half the creature comforts, that's completely not acceptable.
So, quality cars, new cars, those customers absolutely demand it. It's a non-negotiable.
Yep.
Gotta have that stuff.
Yep.
Cool. So we're going to switch to quick answer questions. I'm just going to fire these at you. So tell us about a game-changing product you've seen in the last year.
This might sound biased, but our fuel pump and controller that's coming is
easy plug. Plug away.
It's going to change the game of fuel pumps like we changed the game of injectors. So consider being able to have a single in-tank fuel pump that flows 2 to 3 times what the biggest currently available in-tank fuel pump does.
And what's that? What's the biggest currently available in-tank fuel pump?
I think for the most part, the Walbro E85 pump, 400, 485, whatever you want to call it. By 100 PSI, that pump is 240 liters per hour or so. And I say 100 PSI because that's the range that the stuff that I build ends up being in.
Right.
You can only turn the base pressure down so low, and once you throw a lot of boost at it, you're up in that range. And our pump it's a brushless pump. It's not the Veyron pump, the Walbro pump that everybody's using. It's a Bosch Motorsport pump. We developed the controller on it. The controller is a lot different than anything that's out there. The controller will maintain pump flow regardless of conditions. So it's a positive displacement pump, which means at X RPM, it's going to flow X volume. And if we can maintain that RPM regardless of conditions, then we can maintain the same pump flow regardless of voltage or fuel pressure. So when you look at a typical fuel pump flow graph, you've got flow versus fuel pressure, and it always goes down because as pressure goes up, the pump slows down. So if we're able to drive the pump harder and maintain pump RPM, we can maintain full flow. So we've got full flow with as little as 10 volts and as much as 100 PSI. And that full flow currently is about 620 liters per hour, and we think we can get it even better than that. We're still developing the control on the controller. The other thing it's going to allow you to do is have full pump speed control, so you're not pumping 620 liters per hour at idle. So you'll tell it the max flow you want. You may not need all 600 liters per hour for a particular application. So you could tell it, in this one I need 400 liters per hour, and I need full pump flow by 15 pounds of boost. And there'll be a map sensor with it, and you'll tell it at 15 pounds of boost, 100% duty, it'll scale back from there proportional to airflow. So as you're at less boost, you've got less fuel flow. It's a full closed-loop deal that's pre-programmed. You don't have to figure out this control strategy. You don't have to figure out PWM control on the input side. All you do is hook up a map sensor and flip a switch. So it's really going to change fuel systems, I think.
So a lot of that pump control could be done with certain engine management systems now, but you're making it basically plug and play. You're taking what's really technical and difficult and making it into a plug and play option?
Yeah, there's a lot of systems that have the ability to do a PWM output for pump flow, but then you're still leaving it up to the end user to program it correctly.
Right.
And how many cars on the road with bigger fuel pumps have a stock ECU that don't have that PWM control? Majority.
Most of them.
So
yep.
Being able to do it without requiring the standalone ECU is big.
So, what software program are you using daily? So, give some resources to our listeners. This could be Excel, SolidWorks, even Google Calendar or something like Basecamp for project management. What software program do you find yourself using every day?
We do use Google Calendar for all schedulings, whether it's for time off for the guys or for project scheduling or project appointments, I'd say, not necessarily for scheduling. We use a program called Rike, W-R-I-K-E, for project management, and that's something that all my guys are on. I have my machinist on that as well, so when we take a job to my machinist, he's on board with that. He can update things. It's almost like a Facebook-like layout. So people can make comments on a job. You can do scheduling. There's a ton of capability with it.
Rike is, when you say machinist, you mean engine machinist or parts machinist?
My engine machinist. But it's a deal. You do a yearly membership. You have a certain number of users. So, you can, Paul, for instance, has access to my Rike. He's got a Rike. I've got a Rike. He's got access to mine with certain folders of jobs that still apply to him. So you can add anybody who's relevant to a job, and you can just give them access to that single job. So they can't, when they log on, all they see is what applies to them. So it's a good way to keep people on the same page.
So to everybody listening, it's not black magic that Tony's successful and the business works so flawlessly. If you ever send Tony an email, you'll notice that somebody within his organization gets back to you seemingly within 30 minutes, no matter what day it is. It's uncanny. So it's not black magic. He's using Rike and other software tools, and that's how it's getting done. Would you agree?
Yeah.
No black magic?
Well, a little bit, but...
you won't tell us about that?
No, I can't tell you about that. We use another thing for the email stuff. It's an email ticket system that's called Freshdesk. And any sales at T1 Race Development goes into that. Service at Injector Dynamics goes into that. And so you're not relying on one person having to be sitting in front of their computer to get a response. So once it goes into the ticket system, all my guys have access to that. If it's something that's universal that anybody can handle, then the first one that's available will handle it. If it's something that comes in, as a universal email and I need to handle it or a particular person does, it gets assigned to that person. That person gets an email notification, hey, there's a ticket assigned to you. So it's really, really helps us stay on top of things. 9 times out of 10, we can get an email in 30 minutes before UPS with a PO and get it processed, get it shipped, and get it out the same day.
And I'll vouch for that. Seems like every time that we order something from you guys, it's just you guys are Johnny on the spot.
I think it's
pretty impressive.
I think that's important. Think about how many products that you deal with that you could probably sell more of them if it wasn't such a hassle getting them. Whether it's, build delays or back orders, or I can think. I sent a PO to a company last week for a part that I feel like should be on the shelf at all times. It's one of the few different parts that they offer, and I send a PO. 2 or 3 days later, I get a response that it's been received, and another 3 days after that, I get an email that they're getting ready to ship it, and that's not acceptable to me.
Totally agree. So everything's mobile now. You're obviously all over the place, like I am, like everyone is. Do you have a favorite app? I've got a unit conversion tool called Mila's Tools for length, mass, and volume conversion between units. Do you have anything like that you use that's a resource?
I use Pinterest a lot.
Yeah? What's Pinterest?
Yeah, I'm married. No, I really don't have any super handy apps, but the flashlight and the camera app I use more than daily. And honestly, the camera app and being able to email a customer a picture from your phone, you go back in the shop, oh, hey, there's a crack in his exhaust, I need to show it to him. That used to mean taking out the camera, taking a picture, uploading it, emailing it, and to be able to do that whole thing within, 20 seconds has helped customer communication so much and keeping people in the loop that's extremely handy, and we use that a lot.
Killer. How about a tool? Favorite shop tool? This could be fancy, like a picoscope, or simple, like a power probe. You got to have something in your arsenal that's nobody's ever heard of or you use daily. What do you got?
My favorite tool would be my new dyno.
That's the second time I've heard that, just in the last week.
After 15 years of having traction problems on the dyno, I now have the new mainline 4,000 horsepower hub dyno, and I enjoy tuning again. Every car, I'm able to focus on the engine and the tuning and optimize everything rather than tuning it till it spins and then changing the straps and people getting in the trunk and making another pull again and hoping it doesn't spin enough to get, a reasonable difference in power. And it has literally changed my entire outlook on tuning because everything we do here ends up being really high power and traction limited. And so I would tune it till it spun, and that was all I could do. So
then you got to go to the track and you got to try to take away what you had on the dyno, or you have to try to interpolate beyond. Okay, you can only tune it up to 35 psi, but I'm going to run 50 at the event.
Yep, I found over 200 horsepower in my car from where I thought it was good to where it was when I was done tuning it on the new dyno.
And what's that number? Drop that on us.
1834.
Wheel.
And that's old news already because it's got a wild new turbo setup, and if it doesn't make a lot more than that, I'm going to drive it out in the street. Ghost ride it.
Well, I've seen that. I've seen some of the project pictures of that, and should make quite a bit more than that pretty easily. Wouldn't you agree?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as the engine can stay together.
Yeah, that's a minor issue.
Minor detail.
Yep.
So, what's the future of automotive performance, Tony? Is it electronic? Is everything going to be a hybrid?
Everything
going to be direct injected? Tell us.
Well, fuel injection is definitely going that way. And that's going to be a major roadblock for people like us to do stupid things and, 2 or 3 times the stock power. It's not going to be a big problem for bolt-on type performance upgrades, which as the cars get newer and newer, the electronics get more and more integrated and tricky to work with. So I think with where things are going, people are going to have to be happy with more bolt-on kind of stage 1, stage 2 type stuff. But the good news for those of us that want to build really high horsepower cars, they're not going anywhere. People are still building cars from the 60s, and people are still using carburetors. So
what?
Yeah. Did you know that in 2015 at SEMA, the product that won the best new performance racing product was a carburetor?
I mean, there's still things going on down south, circle track racing.
So by the time fuel injection and the type of stuff that we're working on now is done and people aren't working on it anymore, I'm going to be done with this. So
we're going to be out of gas. There's not going to be any more.
Yeah.
It's not going to be any more fuel.
No problems.
All right. So what's the future for you and your companies, T1 race development and injector dynamics?
Like I said, things are going to direct injection. It's definitely in our future, but right now the port injection world still deserves a lot, and there's a lot of progress to be made. So DI stuff is still kind of on the back burner on our end, and we're focused on more injector options, bigger injectors. The ID 1700 is coming soon. The fuel pumps, there's a huge market out there of cars that need better products. So we still have a lot going on that. GTRs are still coming in the door, and I don't see that changing for a while. People are still building Supras, so we should have a while in the GTR market.
How do we connect with you and your company? How do we get in touch with Tony and find out more about Injector Dynamics and T1 Race Development?
Easiest ways are probably the websites, t1racedevelopment.com and injectordynamics.com. Phone numbers are on there. Email addresses are on there. That way you don't have to remember anything. And
30-minute replies, right?
Yeah, guaranteed.
Something like that.
Almost,
Almost guaranteed. So, hey, man, I just want to say thanks so much. You're an inspiration to myself, a lot of people. I'm honored to, be able to talk to you about this kind of stuff and get the tools of the trade. So thanks for sharing your resources with us. It means a lot.
Thanks for having me. I think it's a really great thing you guys are doing, and hopefully it helps a lot of people.
No doubt. So, hey, for more details about this guest, Mr. Tony Palo himself, check out doitforaliving.net. We'll have all the details about things discussed in this podcast, including 4,000 horsepower hub dynos. What? Who needs that?
Me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app, tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests. Thanks for listening, and good luck. Yeah.
It's an email ticket system. And so when something comes into sales at T1, all my sales guys have access to it. So anytime there's an open ticket, anybody who's not doing anything has access to be able to handle it or assign it to somebody if it's something that needs to be specific to a person. But that's what's helped us keep communication good and contact times fast and get orders. I mean, 90% of the time, UPS gets here at 4:30. If we get an order at 4, we can almost always get it out the same day. But It's because there's always somebody monitoring incoming emails, and it's not one somebody. It's everybody.
So how many guys do you have? Like, you have a shipping guy, and is it his job then to not just ship but like process the order?
No, I have. There's 5 of us total that are on the ticket system. I only get what somebody else decided I need to get. So they'll assign something to me, and I'll grab that. Otherwise, sales inquiries or anything, orders come in, I've got 4 guys that have access to it and are always on top of that. So they'll write it up, process the order, send the paid invoice out to the shipping department, where I have 3 guys out there that are pulling parts, packing orders, and then once it's completely boxed up, the sealed box and the invoice comes back inside to Mitch, who handles all the UPS processing. So there's 3 shipping guys and 4 sales guys.
So Freshdesk is a good example. I noticed that Chris Harris is using Freshdesk too, but his emails also, like when he replies to an email, it says like it's from Freshdesk, so it doesn't feel like it's from him. So his setup isn't set up the same way that yours is, because your emails still look to me like they're from T1, like it still says, Tony at T1 Race Development or whatever.
Yeah, I don't ever send emails out of the ticket system. So you
right.
may or may not have even gotten anything through there. But, I mean, anytime I email you, that's straight through my email account. But
it's Gmail, right?
Yeah,
you use Gmail?
I use Gmail, but it comes from an @T1 address. So
Do you use Boomerang? Do you know what Boomerang is?
I don't know what Boomerang is.
Boomerang is sweet for Gmail. It's a free plugin, and you could send an email while you're thinking about it and schedule it to send like a day or 2 or 5 minutes or 6 weeks later.
Uh-huh.
And then you can also send, you can say, boomerang this back to me in a period of time, whether it be a day or a month or 10 minutes if they don't respond. So if you send an email and they don't respond, it will boomerang back into your inbox as like a reminder.
That actually,
which is kind of cool.
That sounds familiar. Somebody must have mentioned that at some point. It may have been you.
It works really good for me.
Huh.
Anywho.
But, yeah, staying on top of emails has obviously been extremely important and extremely hard. And my goal is to have an empty inbox, which never happens, but that's always the goal. And so if I have something